In the early 2000s, more specifically in the avenue of gaming, was a continuation of what was already brought forth in the late 90s. The biggest gaming companies pooled their resources and creativity to push 3D technology and game design to greater heights, and we have been enjoying the gravy train because of what came before. The PS2, Xbox and GameCube made their entry, pushing the next generation of console gaming forward. PC gaming is still a niche corner appreciated by few, but was growing bigger at a gradual rate. It was arguably the most exciting era in gaming history because of the early 3D titles that were being pumped out. They gave us a glimpse into what was to come over the next few years, and it was only going to get better. I was a kid in 2001. I couldn't tell you what it was like to live as an adult in that time, but I can most certainly tell you about the two games that were very dear to me and still are to this very day. Those games are Max Payne 1 and Grand Theft Auto 3. This will be a double review, in where I will be talking at length about both games, tackling one at a time. I will have timelines down below so you can follow, and as a warning, I will be showing spoilers for both games. If you haven't played either of them, I highly suggest playing them first before watching this video. You have been warned. Max Payne 1 is a third-person shooter developed and published by Remedy Entertainment, combining the best of both worlds, noir storytelling and John Woo-style gameplay, full of shoot-dodging, bullet-time sequences, painkillers, and Max Payne himself with a license to kill and nothing to lose. The earliest showcase was back in '98, and even back then it looked very impressive for its time. But it would take a few years until its vision would be realized into the game that I now know it as. A fantastic but difficult shooter that echoed the Matrix phase, and paved the way for many more to come. Now onto the review, starting with the story and its setting. You play as Max Payne, a cop who comes home to find his wife and child murdered by crazed junkies, and 3 years later, you finally get a trail in the case. But that trail turns into a rabbit hole that only gets darker as you are taken through the subway tunnels, rundown hotels, a nightclub with sinister secrets, alleyways, and more throughout New York City and its dark, decrepit corners. The story starts off with Max on a rooftop, but we don't know why he was there or what he was referring to in the intro cutscene. All of the events throughout the game are told in past tense, leading up to the final encounter. Max Payne himself narrates the story events throughout the graphic novel cutscenes that appear, and his tone akins to that of a hard-boiled detective with nothing left to lose. He also interjects his voice throughout the gameplay in the in-game cutscenes, and it's just as effective. Max's voice really sells the character here. Not only do you hear his loss of faith in the world, but you believe it too. He's seen the worst of humanity, and not once does his voice hide from that fact. However, his personality is balanced out by his sense of humour that interjects itself within the dialogue, and you do occasionally get a slither of light-hearted and funny moments from time to time throughout the game.
We come to you now live from the crime scene.
Who is this?
Right back at you.
This is Deputy Chief Jim Bravura from the NYPD. You are to cease your criminal activities and surrender immediately.
Sure thing, Jim. Me and the boys have been talking, and everyone's real sorry. They'll never do it again.
Who the hell is this?
Being placed at the scene of a bank robbery wouldn't have tipped the odds in my favor.
Despite how badass he becomes, though, taking on an entire mob and eventually a corporation of Black Ops killers with high-tech gear all by himself, he doesn't relish any of it, and I love that. You're not told, but shown by his actions alone that he is not trying to be a hero. Max Payne's story of revenge and the carnage he causes is a result of mending personal tragedy, or coping with it better, and it has nothing to do with misguided vigilantism. The characters Max meets throughout the game are quite memorable, and even the generic bad guys with their occasional small talk and thick New York accents.
Vinny got needy. Just the man I've been killing to see.
Payne? Freaking fed! I knew from day one there was something screwy about you. What do you think you're doing? You're a freaking cop. You ain't got squat on us. You can't just come in here waving your piece like it meant something. Yeah! Oh my God! Oh God, you shot me! Ah! You're dead, Payne! What the hell are you waiting for, you apes? Kill him! Kill him!
With pleasure, boss.
Got needy bailed. I made like Chow Yun Fat.
The acting is actually pretty decent, especially for 2001, where top-notch voice acting wasn't expected in video games. The graphic novel-style cutscenes adds a nice touch to the already nihilistic and oppressive atmosphere the game shows, and this game can get really dark at times, especially when you reach Ragnarok in the Cold Steel Factory. The locales are quite varied and have the same consistent atmosphere throughout each of the levels, giving you the feeling that you are not welcome, and if your gun's empty, you're already dead. At certain points in the game, Max experiences dream sequences which are quite nightmarish. They appear this way because it is a manifestation of his trauma, the very thing that has haunted him for the past 3 years, the death of his family. From a gameplay side, I found it to be quite annoying, but story-wise it does enhance the narrative, and shows us what Max has to deal with on the inside. Max Payne is one of the most memorable characters in the shooter genre, with a personality and presence not unlike John McClane from Die Hard. James McCaffrey was born to voice Max Payne. I honestly cannot imagine it being anyone else. He does an absolutely fantastic job on this game. Now onto the gameplay. The story is fantastic and is well illustrated in its cutscenes and graphic novel showcases, but the meat and potatoes for me is the gameplay. Very few third-person shooters give me that genuine desire to return and replay the game over and over again. The Max Payne series is one of those games, and in 2022, Max Payne 1 still holds fairly well even today. You have a decent arsenal of weapons to select from. The hit detection is, however, hit and miss, but I feel like it was intentional, because most of the time in Max Payne 1 the gunfights can be absolutely chaotic or abrupt. Sometimes they'll get one good shotgun blast and I'm dead, or I'll be dodging bullets like raindrops with the game's shoot-dodge mechanic or roly-polies, slowing down time to control the situation with lightning speed reflexes. Speaking of which, this is where the fun comes in. You see, in the early John Woo films and The Matrix, all of the mechanics I just mentioned came from these movies. The Matrix became the poster boy for action movies for a period of time, and in 2001, the trends that movie set was still fresh. That movie itself followed off of what John Woo had already accomplished in his films. Remedy Entertainment probably went and saw them, and randomly thought of Die Hard or some other noir film while watching them. A no bullshit detective that knows Kung Fu? Why not? Or John McClane meets The Matrix. These thought bubbles would have contributed to the creation of Max Payne, and thank God for John Woo, thank God for The Matrix and Die Hard.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Now further onto the gameplay. Max Payne has a health bar shown as a human figure. When the meter fills up with the red colour, that signifies damage. When it's full, you're dead. Simple as that. You have painkillers that help ease the pain, or in other words, bring the redness down. You'll want to keep a few just in case, because enemies can pull off some shots that will annoy the shit out of you, and sometimes they can react faster than you can blink. You have an hourglass symbol next to your health bar, which functions as your slow motion ability. When activated, time slows down, and it enables you to take control of hairy gunfights rather quickly, and when you shoot dodge it, it automatically goes into slow motion. When enemies shoot, you can actually see the trace of their bullets, which helps to anticipate where the bullets will travel to, allowing for more mobility. But as you use it, the meter does go down, and when there's no more white on the hourglass, you can't use it. The only way to refill it is by killing enemies without it, so you need to manage your usage of the slow motion ability. This game can be quite punishing, and Max Payne can die incredibly quickly. From a random shotgun blast, a grenade that just happened to be there, a well-placed Desert Eagle to your head, and a barrage of Colt Commando fire. Max is like a glass cannon, even on the easiest difficulty. You need to keep moving, and strafe whenever possible, because the enemies will definitely hit you if you don't allow Max to move in multiple directions. You have a good range of standard fare weapons, an assault rifle, an SMG, 3 shotguns, 2 pistols, a grenade launcher, a sniper rifle, grenades and Molotov cocktails. You do have a lead pipe and a baseball bat, but they are useless and will definitely get you killed. You can also dual wield some of the weapons, but they go through ammo like crazy, so you need to be really careful when using them. But the game is manageable. Yes, you will die often, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, but the game is doable, even on the hardest difficulty. The game allows you to save and even quick save, so save scummers like me can rest easy. They had the staff do the motion capture for the game's animations, and even some of the face models are based on said staff. In fact, the character model is based off of the game's writer, Sam Lake. For 2001, they were all well done, and when I watched the behind-the-scenes footage, I could tell that there was a genuine excitement that was felt during the game's development. In the graphic novel cutscenes, they took a number of photos to make it look like a comic strip, which I thought was pretty neat. Fun fact, the face model of the game is Sam Lake's mother. That's right, Sam Lake crushes his own mother with the tip of a skyscraper, as you can see here. Some of the weapons sound great, especially the pump-action shotgun. I swear, in this game, that sound is the stuff of nightmares, and I'm gonna tell you why. When I hear that gun, I immediately roll, or pray to God that I don't get hit by that fucking thing. The shotgun hits like a truck. It does insane damage, even from long range. And God forbid if you get hit by it up close, because even on the easiest difficulty, you are most likely gonna die from it. So, if you see a shotgun, start rolling. You will survive. The soundtrack is pretty decent. It's a mix of dark ambience, frantic action-style music, as well as the creepy bell music that you would hear when you're inside of a dark cult, worshipping Satan or some shit.
This was the rotten core of the Big Apple. Lupino lurked somewhere ahead, like a spider at the center of his web, waiting.
And of course, the main theme itself. The piano that rings in my ear, I always think about it every time I think about Max Payne and the whole series in general. It's the song that completes his story, if not for anything else. The moment you hear it, you know that the game is not going to be a happy one, but a depressive and destructive ride to hell, and I love it. The shoot dodging and rolling is incredibly satisfying to pull off, especially when you kill 5 or 6 bad guys in the same room without a bullet to your gut. But it can also work against you. Shoot dodging spends your slow-mo, and enemies can still hit you even while you're doing it, which is why I don't use it too often unless it's safe to do so, and I rely instead more on rolling. Also, if you align the enemy placement just right, you can manipulate them into hitting each other by accident. It's quite funny when it happens. Other than that though, the rolling is quite useful. I would argue that it's more useful than the shoot dodging itself, but the shoot dodging does look way cooler, I gotta admit. Now, while I take my nostalgia goggles off, I will be explaining some of the gripes I have with the game. For starters, the dream sequences. There's a point where you have to walk along a series of thin, straight lines. They're easy to fall off, and you don't have a sense of direction because everything else is pitch black, aside from where you have to go to, and the red lines themselves. Thematically, it does make sense though, but some visual clarity in the environment would have been appreciated, or at least an option to skip it entirely in case you didn't want to do it over and over again on replays. The damage output of weapons can be inconsistent sometimes. I've had moments where a direct shotgun blast to the head doesn't kill the enemy, but then they turn around and kill me. It's just bullshit, to be honest. The jump is next to useless. It's only good for platforming, and sometimes that doesn't even work. Like when I jump onto the train, or when I jump across the red lines in the dream sequences, Max either gets stuck to the ground, or sometimes doesn't even reach the place I need to reach to. The jump is hit and miss basically. If I was able to shoot and jump at the same time, it would have helped a great deal. In fact, it would have enhanced the shoot dodging and the rolling, as well as the gameplay itself. As for the story, it's not exactly anything groundbreaking. When you put it together, it's actually pretty generic and predictable. Or it would be, if it wasn't for the fantastic presentation and illustration of said story. and Max's pessimistic but occasionally humorous personality that enhances the narrative. Mechanically speaking, it's dated, especially in today's age where animations are more fluid than they have ever been. But that is no fault of the game, because it is a product of its time, and in 2001, Remedy was only able to work with what was possible. While the combat can be addicting and satisfying, it can be equally as frustrating, because of the enemy's amazing ability to spot you. They act immediately, and don't display any sense of confusion or panic. I could come up from behind them and it'll be as if they knew I was coming all along. If they had implemented a delay function in the enemy's actions, or a stealth mechanic in the gameplay, it would have made the game as a whole more dynamic in the combat. In conclusion, Max Payne 1 was, and still is, one of the best third-person shooters I have ever played. It came at a time when companies were continuing to push the envelope of 3D game development and graphical detail, and this game helped contribute to its ongoing evolution. Its legacy still carries over to other third-person shooters that have also made their mark over the years. I still think about this game when I play other third-person shooters. That's how good it is. It has, however, aged poorly, but not enough to the point of being completely unplayable, so I would still recommend it to those wanting to try it out. It also has a few mods worth checking out. My favourite one is the Kung Fu mod. Which actually adds entirely new animations, enhancing the Matrix feeling you get within Max Payne 1's gameplay. Max Payne 1 will forever hold a candle to my hard-boiled heart.
nation's top-selling video game. The object?
Kill as many people as you can, get as many stars as you can.
And millions of kids are mastering it by learning to slaughter bystanders.
It's as close as you can get to killing someone without being arrested or really killing someone.
Kill police officers. Hire prostitutes. Club them to death and reclaim their money.
I'll get an adrenaline rush.
Tonight, it's just a game. Playing Grand Theft Auto 3.
Rockstar are a legendary company in the annals of gaming history. There was a time when a new game by them was guaranteed to be fucking awesome. Games like Bully, Manhunt, Vice City, San Andreas, Red Dead Redemption, and GTA 4 and 5. But lately they've been in hot water for a while, and with the departure of key figures who helped make the GTA series a household name, the future of Rockstar is uncertain. Some people have even considered Red Dead Redemption 2 to be the last great hurrah of the company, and GTA 5, as great as it is, has been probably the most milked game in existence, giving Skyrim a run for its money. But I'm not going to be talking about GTA 5. That will come later in a different video. Instead, I will be talking about a game that brought me the same comfort and childhood memories that Max Payne 1 did. That game is Grand Theft Auto 3. Grand Theft Auto 3 was the continuation of what the previous titles had already accomplished. In the late 90s, Rockstar released Grand Theft Auto into the wild, spawning 2 expansions and a sequel to boot. They offered top-down mayhem that set the blueprint for the coming 3D titles. I played them a little when I was a kid, but I couldn't get into them. I revisited them again recently and I had the same opinion. But I do appreciate and recognise the importance of those games, and I acknowledge the fact that the 3D titles had spoiled me. Grand Theft Auto 3 is the culmination of those games, packaged into a 3D world, offering everything 1 and 2 had and more, including the benefits of being able to play around in a 3D environment, seeing Liberty City in a completely different perspective. This was my gateway into the GTA series, and in my honest opinion, was also the game that really kicked the series off. When it was first showcased, there was a mix of excitement and disappointment. There was also a whirlwind of controversy regarding the game's potential influence among kids and teenagers. With the accessibility of gaming and the advent of 3D technology, the display of violence was becoming more lifelike, and the media had a field day with this topic. You had camps of people advocating banning video games entirely, or people arguing that there wasn't any evidence to support the claim that video games made it easier for kids to kill people. This was inevitable though. GTA 3 just happened to be the game that made the most noise at the time. Not only did it set an example for how to make an open world game in 2001, but it also showed how to make committing crime enjoyable in a video game format. Story and setting. I'm going to be frank here, there's little to no story in this game. The basic premise is that you were involved in a bank robbery that went wrong, when one of the accomplices that happens to be your girlfriend shoots you and leaves you for dead. You take the fall, and are well on your way to the can. Through dumb luck, you manage to escape your predicament during the transport. The bridge blows up and it's just you and 8-Ball. You get in the car, and the game begins with the memorable head radio opening.
This is Head Radio, a love media station. Just one of 900 radio stations, 300 TV stations, 4 networks, 3 satellites, 10 senators.
Thank you.
Head Radio.
You're listening to Head Radio, the rock of Liberty City for 60 years. I'm DJ Michael Hunt taking you through another set of non-stop rock.
Your character's name is Claude, and he doesn't speak, but is spoken to by many of the other characters throughout the game. Nothing is really known about him or what he's really like as a person. He's more or less an avatar for the player to do whatever they want within Liberty City. Throughout the game, you are given missions by a number of different people. You work for various organizations and individuals, from a dying mafia family, a group of Hispanic hoodlums with the best looking gang car in the game, a group of Jamaicans who betray you for no reason, triads with trucks that smell like fish, black hoodlums with a shitbox van, a bent cop, a bent businessman, and the Yakuza that's led by a woman that wants to sleep with you. Your main motivation throughout the story is to just get back at the girl who screwed you over, but the plot doesn't really develop until towards the end of the game. Every other mission is just that. A mission. Content, basically. You start off with doing driving gigs, picking up prostitutes, beating angry customers with a bat while running people over, and eventually making your way to murder and mayhem, until you finally reach annoying missions like Escort Mission and Decoy. They're all quite varied, and the sense of progression is felt when you get access to new weapons and the other 2 islands to explore. Some well-known actors and actresses make their way into this game, and help give personality to characters such as Salvatore Leone, Maria, Tony Cipriani, and other characters like Catalina. They play their parts really well, but it's kind of like they're talking to a mirror. I guess that's just because your character has the personality of a cardboard box. Now, while I said that 1 and 2 were a blueprint for 3, 3 is a blueprint for the rest of the 3D games that would surpass it in just about every single way, such as Vice City and San Andreas, which I will be talking about in their own videos. Story-wise, there's not a great deal more I can say about it. It has more to offer than 1 and 2 in this regard, but then again, I don't recall people ever playing the first 2 for the story, and unfortunately, that reality still checks out for 3. But that's not to say Rockstar didn't try. In fact, as a starting point, it's great. For what it lacks in story, it more than makes up for in setting. Liberty City was shown in the earlier titles, but never on a 3D plane. In retrospect, it looks like shit, and is a lot smaller than I remember. But at the same time, there's a certain atmosphere that's still there. People walked, they swore their heads off, people would steal shit and shoot one another without the interference of the main character. There were talk shows and made-up radio stations that gave life to Liberty City, making the whole place believable. Part of what also makes it believable is that a lot of it is based off of New York, but to avoid further controversy and possible banning of the game, they changed a few details. But only just a few, that it would still look kind of like New York. Portland is the most memorable, Staunton Island is my favourite island out of the three, and Shoreside Vale leaves a lot to be desired. For 2001, this was incredible, and kids were eating it up like it was the last remaining box of cereal. GTA 3 was quite an immersive game for its time. It gave you the feeling that you could do anything you wanted at the time, and that was a pretty powerful feeling for a kid or a teenager. Nowadays we take that freedom in gaming for granted because we've gotten so used to it in games. But GTA 3 was the first game to successfully model a 3D modern setting with a boatload of cars to drive, lives to destroy, bags to secure, and in-game radios to tune into. Not only that, but it made a cultural impact on open world gaming as a whole. Who knows how things would have turned out if it weren't for this game. Now onto the gameplay. If you came off of GTA 1 and 2, then it's the same deal here, but in a 3D format. You drive around, do missions, side missions, rampages, stunt jumps, you name it. It's all there. You even have the top-down camera, both for when you're on foot and when you're in a vehicle. You have a standard array of weapons to choose from, everything from your fists all the way to a rocket launcher. The shotgun is devastating to you in vehicles. The M4 shreds everything in seconds. The sniper one-hits enemies from far distances, and the SMG is your drive-by companion. Compared to the rest of the series, the weapon selection is pretty basic, but they're all useful, except for the bat and the fists, unless you're into that sort of thing. Sound-wise, great across the board. Like in Max Payne 1, the shotgun is the sound of nightmares, especially in GTA 3 when you've pissed off the Leone family. You drive anywhere near their turf and you can say goodbye to any car that you drive. The weapons altogether sound crisp, but not punchy. Animations are quite dated, but aren't too glitchy. Sometimes anyway. PC players have the benefit of free aim with their weapons. Controllers, on the other hand, have to contend with the honest-to-God awful lock-on system, and if you're using the top-down camera, good luck. Vehicles all handle differently, but they all have one thing in common. They are easy to roll and easy to lose. On many occasions, I was unlucky to have my car roll during a mission where I needed to keep it alive, or when I'm accompanying an NPC and they won't get out of the car that's now in flames. Other than the rolling, they handle really well and are a joy to ride in. When you get the tank, place the cannon backwards and see what happens. Just don't ask for any bikes, there aren't any, and don't waste your time with the dodo if you expect to be able to fly. You do have boats though, just don't go in the water. Your character has a health bar with a love heart, and if you find body armor, it will be right next to it. Your money bar is also there, and there's only two things you use it for: buying weapons and ammo, and using money for certain missions that require X amount of money. For example, missions like bomb the base and the final mission. Be grateful enemies can't shred you when you're in a vehicle, because they certainly can when you're on foot. The body armor only does so much to help you here. You take damage very quickly, especially against the Leones and the Colombians, who are the most dangerous gangs in the game. When you die, you respawn at the nearest hospital, with all your shit gone. It can be annoying when this happens, which is why you save regularly so that you don't waste money on buying your weapons back. The original game doesn't have autosave to my knowledge, so it'll be up to you to manually save regularly to maintain your progress. Oh, and when you fail a mission, any mission, you need to travel. Even if you're on the other side. Have fun with that. I certainly did. Now, of course, with all the destruction that you're capable of, there has to be consequences, right? I mean, yeah, you have the gangs that want to kill you on sight and everything, but what about the police? Well, that's where the wanted system comes in. There are a total of 6 stars. Each one escalates the presence of the police force. Having more stars brings in the FIB, which is the FBI basically, and 6 stars brings in the army. All of this can begin from just punching a cop in the face. I shit you not. Usually they just kill you, but if given the chance, they can bust you as well. They can do it by opening the door to your car, if you don't drive away in time, or when you get knocked out on the ground by them, you get busted as well. You respawn at the nearest police station with all your shit gone. Again, just reload your save if you don't want to waste money. Pedestrians and traffic were pretty dynamic for an open world 2001 game. You find many of them just going about their business, and sometimes you'll even encounter altercations in the making. From car theft to fistfights, and sometimes 2 gangs having a shootout. From my history with GTA, I find that to fully explain the world of GTA would ultimately spoil the moment-to-moment nature of GTA's open world design. Each individual experience is unique, and I feel like that was the goal Rockstar had in mind. I mean, we all have different experiences and perspectives in our personal lives. Those same elements also extend to our own personal experiences within the GTA series. GTA 3 was the first game in the series to bring it to 3D. It is magical. Over time, you begin noticing the rotten eggs, the cons of a product. This game has quite a few of them. For starters, it has a little plot to work with that gets pretty much ignored for almost the entire game, up until a certain point anyway. You can't swim, at all. I wasn't expecting to be able to go underwater, but even some animations into doing janky freestyles would have sufficed at least. The aiming for controller is dog shit, and the weapons that allow scope aiming have their own sensitivities that to my knowledge you can't change directly. The biggest cardinal sin is the travelling required when you fail a mission. You could do a mission that takes you from Staunton Island to Shoreside Vale. Guess what? You fail that mission and it's all the way back to Staunton Island. This was mediated in the definitive edition of the game, however. But I am strictly speaking about the original version of GTA 3 and not that abomination. Yes, the animations are quite dated, but that's not really the game's fault, again, because it was made at a time where 3D development was still fairly young and was only just getting started, building off of what the N64 and the PS1 already accomplished. If the game came out like this in today's age, however, then the criticisms towards it would be more valid. Vehicles are too bouncy and roll too easily. It's fun when you're mucking around, but not when you're doing missions that require the vehicle. The amount of hair that's on the ground just from that alone is too vast to quantify. In conclusion, GTA 3 was the beginning of Rockstar's greatness, the blueprint for what the series would become in the coming years. Other franchises looked to GTA 3 at the time as an example on how to make an immersive open world game in a modern setting. This game was a massive success for Rockstar, giving them a pool of cash to fund future projects, enough to even make an expansion for GTA 3, which would later be its own game, Vice City. There's hours of history, insight on just this game alone and what it did for not just 3D gaming, but gaming as a whole. Looking back, it's certainly dated, more so than I realized when I revisited it. If I had to pick only one GTA game for the rest of my life to play, this wouldn't be it. Compared to future titles, it offers little, and when you've completed the story, there isn't a great deal to do besides doing the taxi missions, ambulance and police missions, rampages and stunt jumps and package collecting. When the dust settles, you only just have mayhem and destruction to cause. And that's what GTA 3 really is, chaos in a bubble. But it's a great time still if that's all you're in it for. I certainly was when I was a kid, and so were many other kids in 2001. I am so grateful I got to have a childhood with GTA 3. For all its faults, I want you to try this game out, to see where the greatness of the future GTA games came from. And that's all she wrote, folks. GTA 3 and Max Payne 1 were some of my favourite games growing up, and I wanted to give them as much time as I could talking about them. I implore you to play them both. They both made their mark on gaming history. They both have replay value that most games can't say they have, and best of all, just about any computer nowadays can run them. As long as you are willing to look past the dated graphics and gameplay, you will find a great game in each of them. Thank you for watching.
The triads think they can mess with me? Let's teach these would-be tough guys what it means to be a tough guy.
No son of mine gets up by some triads.
Sorry, Ma.
Took no crap from those triads.
Yes, Ma.